It began with a discovery frozen in time, a fossil encased in prehistoric ice, buried beneath the weight of forgotten epochs. The plan was to transport it back to civilization aboard a quiet train journeying across the Siberian winter, but what they thought was not dead. On board that train, no one could agree on what it was. A beast, a spirit, a mistake of science? All they knew was that something had awakened, something ancient, aware, and dangerously intelligent. One by one, passengers began to unravel their thoughts stolen, their memories erased, their souls seemingly extracted through a single burning stare. The film they made about it was just as strange. Built from recycled sets and powered by grief, loss, and eerie coincidence, Horror Express wasn't just a horror movie, it was an accident of brilliance. An unlikely mix of Cold War paranoia, cosmic terror, and raw emotional residue sealed inside a rattling train that never actually moved. Behind the camera, the story grew darker. A grieving legend almost walked away. A forgotten performance shaped the monster's form. Real blood, lost reels, and whispered sounds no one could trace, all hidden within frames meant to terrify, but now archived as legend. They called it fiction, but parts of it refused to stay silent. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about Horror Express. 1,972. Fact 1. This train was built from leftovers. You never truly see the train move. And when you think you do, it's only an illusion, a trick of sound, lighting, and careful framing. The strangest truth behind Horror Express is that the iconic Trans-Siberian train never existed as a functioning set. Not once did it roll, shake, or thunder down actual tracks. Everything you see, every corridor, every compartment, every cramped walkway, was built from scraps inside a Madrid studio. The production reused leftover pieces from older films, stitching them together into a labyrinth of rooms that looked convincing only through clever cinematography. The same stretch of hallway appeared again and again, repainted, relit, flipped, or slightly redressed to seem new. The actors did the rest. They practiced synchronized sways, gripping handrails, shifting their weight to mimic motion, while the floor beneath them remained perfectly still. Meanwhile, the sound team constructed a symphony of rumbling metal, groaning wheels, and distant whistles to make the set feel alive. The truth is simple. They didn't have the money to shoot on a real train, or even create a full replica. But their limitations became a creative weapon. The static set created a sense of confinement, a trap with no exit fitting, far better than any practical locomotive ever could. The train wasn't moving, but the horror inside it never stood still. Fact 2. Peter Cushing wasn't performing, he was grieving. Peter Cushing arrived on set carrying a loss far greater than any role could demand. His wife, Helen, had died not long before filming began. The grief hadn't faded, it had hollowed him out. Friends described him as fragile, almost spectral in the months that followed her passing. When he reached Madrid, he was ready to abandon the film entirely. He told the producers he couldn't do it, the emotional weight was too much. It wasn't the work he feared, it was the silence between takes, the moments when he'd be left alone with his thoughts. He planned to pack his bags, return home, and disappear from the project. Then Christopher Lee intervened, not as a co-star. As a friend, they talked late into the night. Lee didn't try to change Cushing's mind with logic or persuasion. He simply reminded him that creating something, anything, might be a way to survive the ache. That working together, as they had so many times before, could offer a kind of temporary refuge. Cushing stayed, and what he delivered wasn't a performance shaped by scripts or direction, it was shaped by loss. The tremors in his voice, the fatigue in his eyes, the sorrow beneath his stillness, none of it was pretend. He wasn't acting haunted. He was haunted. Fact 3. What they called a mummy was something else entirely. The posters lied. The marketing misled. For years, audiences assumed Horror Express was a pulpy creature feature about a frozen mummy revived on a doomed train. But the truth hiding beneath the ice was far stranger than anything mythological. The corpse recovered in the Manchurian mountains wasn't a relic of ancient civilization. It was a shell, a discarded body temporarily inhabited by an extraterrestrial intelligence. The being inside wasn't bound by flesh. It survived by migrating from host to host, absorbing knowledge and memories, leaving only empty minds and milk-white eyes behind. Its inspiration didn't come from tombs or curses. The filmmakers drew from speculative science fiction and Cold War paranoia, stories about identity theft, brainwashing, and cosmic beings drifting through time. The creature's true horror wasn't physical, it was conceptual. It didn't attack. It infiltrated. It studied. It learned. and the more it learned, the more dangerous it became. This wasn't a monster resurrected from history. It was something history had tried and failed to bury. Fact 4. The glowing eyes almost cooked the actor. The monster's eyes in Horror Express are unforgettable twin red orbs burning in the dark, paralyzing victims with a stare that seems to reach into the brain. But what most viewers don't know is that this haunting glow wasn't added in post-production. It came from a very real, very dangerous source. The red effect was achieved using small light bulbs embedded into the creature's mask, powered by external batteries running down the actor's back. These weren't LEDs. This was 1,972, and the bulbs produced heat, a lot of it. The performer inside the costume, who went uncredited, could only wear the full setup for minutes at a time. The mask would heat up rapidly, trapping sweat and causing the actor's vision to blur. Crew members had to stand by with towels and fans, ready to cool him down between takes. Making matters worse, the smoke that surrounded the monster, that thick, eerie mist, came from burning magnesium strips and dry ice. The result, a suffocating atmosphere around a man sealed in rubber, blinded by red-hot lights. The director later joked that the monster looked like it came from hell because it was filmed in hell. And he wasn't far off. Those iconic eyes, they burned their way into film history and nearly into the actor's skin. Fact 4. The glowing eyes almost cooked the actor. The monster's eyes in Horror Express are unforgettable twin red orbs burning in the dark, paralyzing victims with a stare that seems to reach into the brain. But what most viewers don't know is that this haunting glow wasn't added in post-production. It came from a very real, very dangerous source. The red effect was achieved using small light bulbs embedded into the creature's mask, powered by external batteries running down the actor's back. These weren't LEDs. This was 1,972, and the bulbs produced heat, a lot of it. The performer inside the costume, who went uncredited, could only wear the full setup for minutes at a time. The mask would heat up rapidly, trapping sweat and causing the actor's vision to blur. Crew members had to stand by with towels and fans, ready to cool him down between takes. Making matters worse, the smoke that surrounded the monster, that thick, eerie mist, came from burning magnesium strips and dry ice. The result, a suffocating atmosphere around a man sealed in rubber, blinded by red-hot lights. The director later joked that the monster looked like it came from hell because it was filmed in hell. And he wasn't far off. Those iconic eyes, they burned their way into film history and nearly into the actor's skin. Fact 5. They built a scientific nightmare from a cow brain. There's a moment in Horror Express that still unsettles even seasoned horror fans. A brain dissection scene, where the inside of a human skull is revealed to be smooth, like all the ridges and folds have been erased. It's an eerie, impossible image, and it came from something very real. The brain prop was created using a cow brain, sourced from a local butcher. The production team, working with minimal budget but lots of creativity, covered it in gelatin to give it sheen, then gradually melted away the folds using hot air and water. The final result looked disturbingly artificial and yet undeniably organic. The concept behind it was pulled from fringe neuroscience, the idea that if knowledge could be extracted from a brain, the physical imprint of memory might vanish. A pseudo-scientific fantasy, maybe, but perfect for horror. The reaction on set was visceral. Some crew members gagged. An extra fainted. One actor refused to eat lunch after the scene wrapped. It was grotesque. It was over the top. And it was all based on something that once lived. Fact 6. This train ran parallel to The Thing. Long before John Carpenter brought his shape-shifting alien to the Arctic, Horror Express quietly explored a similar nightmare. An entity buried in ice, unearthed by men who didn't understand it, and set loose to copy and kill. And it wasn't a coincidence. The film was loosely inspired by the same source material, Who Goes There?, the novella that later became The Thing. But Horror Express went in a different direction. Instead of isolation in the snow, it gave us confinement in motion. Instead of a remote outpost, it trapped the terror inside a metal vessel, hurtling forward with no escape. Even more interesting, the production didn't officially license the story. The writers claimed only inspiration, relying on the legal ambiguity of European copyright at the time. That technicality allowed them to build a new version of the myth less bloody, but just as philosophical. The result? A spiritual sibling to The Thing that arrived a full decade earlier. 2 stories, 2 frozen awakenings, and 1 shared warning: what you dig up might not stay dead. Fact 7. They made a movie with spare change. It's easy to mistake Horror Express for a higher budget production. The camera glides smoothly. The lighting feels theatrical. The costume and creature work are convincing. But behind the curtain, this film was stitched together with a budget that barely covered catering. Final estimates place the production budget at around $300,000, a figure so low. Even in 1972, it bordered on laughable. And yet, the crew made it work. The solution? No waste, no excess, no ego. Sets were recycled. Props were borrowed from other films. Costumes were repurposed. The snowy exteriors, shot using miniatures and flour. The train model, held together with tape and fishing wire. Soldiers and extras, local volunteers, some of whom were paid with food. Even the camera equipment was rented for a limited window, which meant the schedule was brutal. Long days, fast resets, minimal room for mistakes. Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing worked on reduced salaries. They weren't there for money, they were there for each other. And perhaps that's why the film works. It doesn't rely on spectacle. It leans on mood, tension, and a sense of creeping inevitability, the kind of horror that money can't buy. They didn't have millions, but they had vision, timing, and something to prove. Fact 8. A score that elevated everything. The music in Horror Express doesn't just accompany the story, it defines it. From the first few notes, there's a chill, a lurking sense of unease, even when nothing's happening on screen. That's the power of John Kakavas, the composer who gave this low-budget horror film a score that sounded like it belonged in a major studio thriller. Kakavas wasn't a horror specialist. He came from a background in orchestral television scores and political dramas. But for Horror Express, he went all in, composing a sweeping, layered arrangement filled with dissonant strings, unsettling percussion, and melodic fragments that feel like half-remembered nightmares. He approached the film with seriousness, treating it not as pulp, but as atmospheric psychological horror. The result is a soundtrack that does more than support scenes, it guides them. And here's the irony. The producers almost threw it out. In a last-minute panic over cost, they considered replacing the entire score with public domain library music. It was only after a strong objection from Christopher Lee, who called the music the film's soul, that Kakavas's work was preserved. He elevated the movie, and in doing so, made sure it wouldn't be forgotten. Fact 9. Religion wasn't the villain, but it became one. One of the most disturbing elements in Horror Express doesn't come from the monster. It comes from a man of faith. Father Pujardov begins the film as a background character, a nervous, devout priest clutching his cross as the train barrels into darkness. But as the story progresses, something shifts. His fear curdles into obsession. His reverence warps into desperation. By the film's midpoint, he isn't praying for salvation. He's praising the creature. He calls it divine, says it was sent to punish the wicked. He welcomes it as a cleansing fire. In a film filled with scientific horror, Pujardov becomes something else, a fanatic, ready to serve a force he doesn't understand simply because it fills the silence where God used to be. This portrayal caused backlash. Religious authorities in multiple countries condemned the film for corrupting sacred symbols. In Spain and Italy, censors demanded cuts. In Ireland, the film was quietly passed over for theatrical release altogether, but the filmmakers refused to recut it. To them, Pujardov wasn't a critique of religion, he was a critique of blind faith in anything. Because in the absence of meaning, people will worship anything that speaks, even if it speaks in blood. Fact 10. A meltdown caught on camera. There's a moment in Horror Express that feels too authentic. A man stumbles down a corridor, sweat beading, eyes wide, movements disjointed like something is unraveling inside him, and in a way, something was. That scene wasn't planned. It wasn't even rehearsed. Actor Angel Del Pozo had been on set for nearly 15 hours when they called for one more take. The lights were blistering hot. The air was stale. His uniform clung to him like plastic. And as the camera rolled, his body gave in. The sway in his walk wasn't acting. The panic in his eyes wasn't staged. He was about to collapse. The crew didn't realize it immediately. The director assumed he was improvising, adding a layer of dread to the performance. So the camera kept rolling. Only after he hit the floor off screen did someone yell, "Cut." Del Pozo was fine, dehydrated, shaken, but fine. When they played the footage back, they were stunned. It was terrifying, visceral, real. The director decided to use it. What ended up in the film was part fiction, part human fragility. The horror wasn't just in the story. It was happening just outside the frame. Fact 11. The monster never showed its true form. Audiences remember the creature from Horror Express, the lumbering, fur-covered thing pulled from the ice, its glowing red eyes, its ragged face. But here's the truth. That wasn't the monster. Not really. That was a shell. a host, a physical prison for something much worse. As the film unfolds, it becomes clear that the real danger isn't the beast, it's what lives inside it, a presence, a consciousness, a memory that doesn't belong to any one form. Once the alien leaves its initial body, it begins to transfer, moving through human hosts, jumping between minds, leaving nothing behind but empty brains and dead eyes. Each new victim becomes keener, calmer, more calculated, and that's when the terror shifts. The film stops being about what you see. It becomes about what you can't, who's already been taken, who's still human, and whether identity itself is just a fragile illusion. By the end, we no longer fear the creature in the crate. We fear everyone else. Fact 12. The lost scene that could have changed everything. According to old production notes, Horror Express once had an entire subplot, one that never made it into the final film. There was a classified military carriage, a sealed container. Inside, not weapons but strange Soviet technology, rumored to track radiation patterns beyond the Earth's magnetosphere. In one cutscene, Lee and Cushing's characters reportedly discover that the device had registered a spike the moment the creature thawed. The implication? That someone knew what was buried in the ice. That the train wasn't just carrying passengers, but a payload meant to be observed or contained. But the footage vanished. To this day, no one knows what happened to it. Some say it was never fully filmed. Others believe the reels were lost during an editing transfer, mislabeled, and thrown out. Only a single production still remains. A dimly lit corridor, a crate covered in Cyrillic script, and a man in a Soviet officer's uniform. What would this subplot have meant? Maybe nothing. Maybe everything, but its absence has left a hole, the kind that invites conspiracy. Fact 13. It wasn't released. It escaped. Most films arrive with a bang: premieres, posters, interviews, reviews. Horror Express didn't. It slipped into existence like fog creeping into a cold window. After its initial release in Spain and the UK, the film didn't catch fire. It barely flickered. No major studio pushed it. No critics championed it. And yet, it spread. On VHS shelves in the late 70s, under different titles: Panic on the Trans-Siberian, Night Train to Terror, even Murder on the Trans-Siberian Express. Some versions were chopped, others badly dubbed. But it didn't matter. Horror fans passed it around, copying tapes, whispering about the one with the train and the alien. In time, Horror Express became a myth more than a movie not discovered, but stumbled upon. Found in attic boxes, on scratch discs at flea markets, on late-night television with static curling at the edges of the frame. Its resurrection came not through studios, but through obsession. Fan restorers, cult cinema collectors, people who knew there was something buried under the bad transfers, something worth preserving. Horror Express wasn't supposed to survive, but somehow it did. Fact 14. The man behind the mask vanished from history. The creature terrified audiences, but no one remembers the man who wore the suit. His name was Juan Olaguivel, a veteran stunt performer and background actor in Spanish genre cinema. He didn't speak, he wasn't credited, but his physicality defined the monster: the heavy, jerking movements, the breathless lunges, the eerie stillness between attacks. The costume was a nightmare: layers of fur, latex glued directly to skin, glowing lights near the eyes that nearly blinded him. In one take, he fainted inside the suit. In another, he dislocated his shoulder, crashing into a wall. There were no stunt doubles. He was the stunt. Cushing and Lee later mentioned him in interviews, calling him essential. But the industry didn't. After Horror Express, he faded. His name appears on no posters, no box art, no promotional material. He played the monster, but the monster got all the credit. Fact 15. One frame doesn't belong to this world. There's a split second in Horror Express, a moment during one of the creature's psychic attacks where the screen distorts, the lighting shifts, the angle tilts, and just for a breath of time, a flickering shadow appears on the side of the frame, a shape with no origin, no actor behind it, and no explanation in the script. When the film was remastered years later, the technicians isolated the frame. They found nothing in the preceding or following shots that could explain it. No prop, no crew member, no lighting rig, just an image that wasn't supposed to be there. The director claimed it was a camera error, a light leak, something chemical, but the editor remembered differently. He recalled that the original negative didn't contain the glitch, that it appeared only after the sound mix, after the final print was locked. He said, "It looked like something had inserted itself into the film. Accident, interference, or a final trick from a story about possession. Whatever it was, it's still there. You just have to watch very, very closely." Fact 16. the line he couldn't say. Christopher Lee was known for control, his booming voice, statuesque presence, and razor-sharp timing, rarely flustered, never broken. But during one particular scene in Horror Express, he couldn't speak. It wasn't nerves. It wasn't the script. It was grief. The line was simple, a quiet observation about loss, spoken while looking at a child's remains. The crew expected a single take, but Lee froze. The words stuck. He tried again, failed. Finally, he stepped off set. What no one knew was that Lee had recently lost a family member, a child he was close to. That scene, that moment, cut too deep. He didn't return for hours. No one dared to push. It was Peter Cushing, also grieving, who sat beside him in silence. Two men known for playing monsters, mourning in private. When Lee did return, he didn't rehearse. He walked in, looked at the body on the table, and said the line cold, detached, and hollow. It was perfect. Fact 17. He played madness and it haunted him. Alberto de Mendoza wasn't your typical genre actor. Before Horror Express, he was mostly known for romantic dramas and historical epics. He was scholarly, thoughtful, and famously skeptical of horror. So when he accepted the role of Father Puhardov, it shocked his colleagues. He'd be playing a man who slips into religious mania, who sees a monster and calls it divine, who worships destruction, and he didn't like it. In interviews years later, de Mendoza admitted he was uncomfortable throughout the shoot. He researched cult leaders, read about religious extremism, and tried to understand the void that would make a man betray his own morality. But the closer he got, the more disturbed he became. He confessed to having dreams of fire, of voices, of staring into a face that stared back, empty. Puhardov wasn't just a character to him. He was a warning, and playing him left a scar. Fact 18. The blood on screen wasn't just makeup, the bleeding eyes, the smears on the walls, the thick, slow trickles down faces and necks. The gore in Horror Express hits harder than expected for a film of its era, and there's a reason for that. Some of the blood was real, not human blood but animal, sourced directly from a local slaughterhouse and mixed with syrup and dye. It was cheaper than buying synthetic gore and, according to the effects team, looked better under light. But there were consequences. The heat from the lamps made the blood congeal. It began to stink. Actors had to wear it for hours during retakes. One collapsed from nausea. Another broke character mid-shot and nearly threw up on camera. After complaints, the crew switched to fake blood. But some of the most iconic scenes, including the infamous eye bleed moment, still used the real thing. It was visceral, authentic, and no one who wore it ever forgot the smell. Fact 19. This movie came back from the dead. After Horror Express wrapped and made its quiet rounds in European cinemas, it vanished. There was no legacy, no cult audience, no restoration plan. The film was filed away, forgotten like the monster it portrayed. Then came the real horror. The original negatives were destroyed. Lost during a warehouse clearance by the Spanish production partner, the master reels were either mislabeled or deemed worthless. Some were recycled for silver, others were simply tossed. By the time anyone noticed, it was too late. For years, all that remained were damaged TV prints and bootlegs, degraded, discolored, and sometimes incomplete. For many, Horror Express became a ghost film, glimpsed but never seen clearly, until someone found a copy. Not in a vault, not in an archive, but in a British railway museum, of all places. The 35mm print had been donated as part of a train film exhibition and forgotten on a dusty shelf. It was intact, faded, but salvageable. Thanks to digital remastering, the film now lives again, a horror movie that nearly suffered its own extinction. Fact 20. The last scene was never meant to exist. If you've seen Horror Express, you remember the ending, that strange, otherworldly image of a train suspended in space, drifting like a lost soul through the cosmos. It's abstract, unexplained, and unforgettable. But here's what you might not know. It was never in the script. The original ending was grounded. The survivors limp away from the wreck. The creature is gone. Story over. But during editing, the director felt it was too clean, too final. He wanted ambiguity, mystery. So he spliced in unused footage from an unrelated Soviet sci-fi short, layered it with eerie music, and placed it at the end. Suddenly, the story shifted. Did the train escape time? Was this all in someone's mind? Was the alien still alive, drifting through memory and metal? No one gave answers. They just let it hang like the train itself. Bonus fact. The sound that shouldn't be there. In a film full of eerie moments, there's one that's never been explained. During post-production, as Peter Cushing re-recorded a line for a quiet laboratory scene, the sound engineer froze. Beneath Cushing's voice, layered in the silence, there was something else. A whisper, They isolated the track, checked the room, nothing, no background noise, no second voice on the reel, just a low, unintelligible murmur, a sound that didn't belong to anyone in the booth. They replayed it again. It was still there, soft, disjointed, like something breathing through static. Cushing, upon hearing it, didn't flinch. He simply said, "Leave it in, it fits." The team never identified the source, but if you listen closely, headphones on, volume high, you'll hear it too. Not every haunting needs a ghost. Sometimes, the film is already listening. What if the monster never left the train? What if it found a new form, not in the story, but in the people who keep watching it? If Horror Express 1972 surprised you, tell us which moment chilled you most, which fact rewrote the movie in your mind. And if there's another lost film, buried secret, or haunted set you want us to investigate, leave it in the comments. We're always listening. Subscribe for more forgotten horror, unburied truths, and the stories behind the stories. This journey's over, but the next one might already be on track.